All guests on ZASLOW Show 2.0 brought to us by the official beer of the program, Johnny Cuba. European roots with that Caribbean soul. Pick up a refreshing German lager in a can. Your local Sedanos, Presidente, Winn-Dixie. Whole lot more outlets. Just go to johnnycuba.us. Use the Johnny locator. You'll find out exactly where you can pick up a six-pack nearest you. Remember, always drink responsibly. And don't forget Johnny Cuba's mantra, stay tranquilo. Very excited to look at that put him right there. Look at Jamey Eisenberg, CBS Sports Fantasy Football expert. Very excited to have him back. Number one, he's a decent guy. Number two, it means that we're so close to football. Fantasy football is here. Everyone is setting their dates, their drafts. We're doing mock drafts. How many years we've been doing this? I feel like you've been doing a weekly spot on some version of my show for... It's got to be over 10 years, right?
Oh, maybe 15. Yeah, I've been at CBS since 2006, and I'm sure not long after that we started, doing this. So it's always good to talk to you. I always love when I hear "stay tranquilo." Makes me happy, makes me smile. So good to talk to you, bud.
Yeah, good to see you. Good to have you on again. And I wonder. I'm an old school fantasy football guy. Like I have a league that I do with my pals. Our drafts in it's in a couple weeks, like right before the season opener. And we've been doing essentially the same group of guys, 12-team league. For this would be, I was 16. So this would be year number 28. No, 28, 26, maybe 26 or 27 years. Same group I've been doing, okay? And what I'm getting at here is I'm an old school fantasy football guy. I don't do the daily fantasy football. I like having my team. I like the draft. I like managing my guys all throughout the year. But do you find with the popularity of the daily fantasy sports, is that taking away at all from the conventional fantasy football leagues?
Not really. I think it just enhances it. The nice thing about the daily leagues, and I hope this is the case because I hope this is, for their business model, is a lot of people that are like you, and I'm the same way. I prefer season long to daily, but obviously, injuries play a part. Sometimes you just have bad luck, and your season tends to, get messy and maybe ends a little sooner. It still gives you the fantasy fix through the end of the season. Right. There's also, DraftKings does a good job of this. Underdog, for example, two sites that I play best ball leagues on, which are you draft a team, and if you just love the draft process, you draft a team. And then you forget about it. You just go back at the end of the season, you see how it played itself out. So best ball is something that's certainly become a lot more popular over the last couple of years. But I'm a junkie across the board, so I like as many fantasy leagues as possible. I have a hard time saying no. So anytime somebody says, "Hey, you want to join my league?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" But yeah, I certainly dabble in a lot of daily leagues, but it doesn't take away from I guess me being a traditionalist and an old school guy, like you said, of still wanting the seasonal redraft leagues and enjoying that process.
So for people who are preparing for their fantasy drafts, which I would imagine most folks who are listening to us right now, they got their drafts coming up. Let's say 12-team league, all right? And let's break it up into that first round who you're going to build your team around. Let's break it up, I guess, into 3 spots. Picks 1 through 4, picks 5 through 8, and picks 9 through 12. So those 3 spots, what position should we be, honing in on to start our team if we're in one of those 3 zones, if you will?
It's kind of a messy first round right now because you have really 3 injuries that are impacting the first round with McCaffrey and his calf injury, Jahmyr Gibbs and his hamstring injury, and Puka Nacua, who for the most part was a first round pick, but has kind of slid into the second round with his knee injury. Then you have 2 holdouts that we're keeping an eye on at the top of the draft, which are CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase. And so some people just want to avoid it. And the reason I bring it up is it makes it a little tricky to navigate those 3 zones because where you pick, you may be taking somebody who there's some uncertainty with right now, if you're drafting right now. Hopefully in 2 weeks, we know the answers to all of these problems. But the way that I kind of approach it is, and I've built kind of my first round rankings based on what I want to see happen in round 2. Because round 2 is a very, very big minefield right now of a lot of different players and different ways to go. Because I don't think we're going to see all the quarterbacks pushed up like we saw last year. Last year, the 3 top quarterbacks were being drafted in round 2. And we don't have the security And I say that the security of Travis Kelce's guaranteed performance, because we saw him tail off last year and now he's 35 and there's another group of tight ends that are catching up to him based on what we saw at least from a year ago. So when you get to the beginning part of the first round, I think McCaffrey, as long as we don't get anything worse on his calf, is still the number 1 overall pick. For me, I go heavy receiver next. And again, that could change depending on the holdouts for Chase and Lamb. But for me, it's Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb right now still, Justin Jefferson, even with the quarterback situation, Jamar Chase, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I would take those 5 receivers in a row. Some people like to put those 2 running backs next behind McCaffrey in those next 5 guys, and I have no problem with that. But again, it kind of sets up round 2 of Breece Hall and Bijan Robinson. They kind of go back to back and in different orders. And then the back half of the first round, so we're looking at pretty much a solid 8 players. The back half of the first round, I should say 9 players because A.J. Brown belongs in there as well. So it's after A.J. Brown is kind of what you pick your poison type of thing. If you like going running back, which in PPR a lot of people like to avoid, you can, but it means you're buying into either a banged up Jahmyr Gibbs or Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor. I have no problem with those 2 guys going back to back. We could see, if there's a Brandon Ayuk trade, Deebo Samuel creep into the back end of round 1. But really, Garrett Wilson also is in that range too. And so it's kind of, I think, again, how you want to sort of look at round 2. Because round 2, there's a lot of good running back value, in my opinion. Not a lot of great solidified wide receivers, because it's Marvin Harrison, who's a rookie. It's Drake London, Chris Olave, some unproven third-year receivers. And then it's the older guys of Devontae Adams, Mike Evans, the uncertainty again of the San Francisco guys. So there's a lot of just minefields that you have to navigate in round 2. So I prefer to go receiver, running back if I can, which is why I like those if I'm picking early, which is why I like those receivers 2 through 6.
Okay, so if you're in the first half of the first round, you like going, unless you're number 1 overall, you like going receiver and running back, then the back end of the second round. But what if we're selecting late first round, so late first, early second? What's the combo you think you like?
So if you're 9-10, for me, that's A.J. Brown, Garrett Wilson. And then I would come back. If you want to go receiver, you can with Marvin Harrison or maybe Drake London. Again, Deebo will be in that range too.
We believe Marvin Harrison's going to be a guy right away.
Yeah. I mean, the prospect profile is clearly amazing. He ended up in a great spot with a very good quarterback who's going to pepper him with targets. That's been Kyler Murray's track record when he has a receiver like this, DeAndre Hopkins, Marquise Brown. He's leaned on that type of guy. So the profile fits and the landing spot was great. But again, it's buying into uncertainty. And a lot of people don't like to do that. They would prefer to say, okay, I'd rather go Garrett Wilson and even he's uncertain because, we really haven't seen it from him yet, but Aaron Rodgers should hopefully unlock that. And still coming back with a Devontae Adams, who's, anywhere in this range, or going with a running back there of Derrick Henry, maybe, Kyron Williams coming off what he did last year. Isaiah Pacheco, who's coming off a big season. So Travis Etienne, there's a lot of different ways you can go. For me, my preferred roster build is a strategy that's come upon the last couple of years called Hero RB, where you take one running back in the beginning part of your draft, and then you kind of circle back mid-round to take that second or third running back. But it's getting at least one of those top tier guys early.
But you could essentially only do that hero running back strategy if you get like one of the top 3 guys, right?
No. I think if you go you tell me round 1, I take Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then I come back in round 2 and I get Isaiah Pacheco, who's my number 7 running back. And then I'm going to go receiver in rounds 3 and 4, tight end, quarterback, and then come back my running backs. I think as long as it's a top 10 guy, you're okay going that strategy.
And how about, I feel like that strategy also lends itself to the idea of if you make sure you get one of the running quarterbacks, then you're really golden, right?
Yes, but again, those guys come with risk because, for me, Anthony Richardson is my number 5 quarterback, and I'm going to put the other 3 running quarterbacks that people would most likely consider of Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson in a different category because you've seen it from them over a period of time. Anthony Richardson was great last year, but really for 2 games. He played 5, and in some of those games, he was on pace for huge performances, but really only 2 games. And you can see the upside, but there's risk. You see the upside with Kyler Murray, but again, he's coming off a year removed from the ACL tear, and it was a little disappointing in the 8 games that he played last year. Jaden Daniels could break fantasy as a rookie. He's got that much upside after what he showed at LSU, and a couple good passes in the preseason.
You would be comfortable starting him right out the gate?
So I think if you're going to draft any of these guys that don't have at least a lengthy resume, so Richardson is at the high end of that. And then it's a little bit of a sliding scale. So I go Richardson at 5. I have Kyler Murray at 6. I have Jaden Daniels at 9. Sandwiched in between those running quarterbacks are CJ Stroud and Joe Burrow. If you're going to go, and then I have right behind Jaden Daniels a couple spots is Caleb Williams. I think anytime you're going with somebody without a good resume, you probably want to take two quarterbacks, and there's easy guys to pair them with. So the trio that I would prefer is if you can go one of those three guys. Kyler maybe not so much, but Richardson and Daniels and Williams. Jared Goff, great schedule, only 3 outdoor games. Tua, obviously, amazing early part of the season from last year. If it, just want to mirror last year, but the chance to lead the NFL in passing yards again, great weapons. And Brock Purdy, who's also, coming off a very strong season, good weapons, but again, a little uncertainty with Brandon Ayuk. Any three of those quarterbacks with the younger guys, so Richardson sophomore, the other two rookies, you should be pretty good shape.
What's the cutoff at quarterback? I'm assuming Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts. Once those three guys are taken, what's the cut?
Yeah.
And Mahomes. So that's the cutoff. Then when do you find yourself, okay, those 4 quarterbacks are off the board. You know what? I'm going to wait. How long do you wait then after those guys are off the board?
So if you're talking 4 points for passing touchdowns, Richardson's going to come pretty quickly behind those 4 just because, again, the rushing upside. Kyler Murray will be not far behind him. And then I think Daniels will be in that mix of, the next group of Burrow and Stroud, just because, again, some uncertainty. So I'm always going to, kind of play the board. What I always try to tell people is you're going to get to a spot in the running back and receiver rankings where hopefully you have your core group, and it just doesn't feel like you want to reach for somebody that's got some uncertainty or scared about some of these older guys that could potentially break down. So that's a good spot to take your quarterback. And it's so deep. Again, I gave you 3 guys that, are in the 12 through 15 range, depending on whose rankings you look at with Tua, Purdy, and Goff. But I think we'll see Matthew Stafford still play at a relatively decent level. He finished the season strong. You have Kirk Cousins, Aaron Rodgers, guys that have done it before coming off of injuries. Trevor Lawrence, I think, is going to bounce back from a disappointing campaign. And let's not forget, once you get past Stroud and Burrow, I have Daniels ranked pretty aggressively, but there's still Dak Prescott and Jordan Love as well. So it's a very deep position. So I don't think you have to reach for a quarterback at any point. Just, you don't want to leave yourself a little bit thin where some people start taking their second quarterback before you get your first.
Who do you find is being overvalued right now early on in drafts?
At any position?
Yeah.
For me, it's somewhat of the older players. Now, I kind of talk out of both sides of my mouth in this regard because I'm still a Tyreek Hill guy. I don't think it's hard to make a case for him, but he's 30. Derrick Henry, who's also old for that position, but to me, those two guys are like aliens. They're just hard to replicate and still, I think, playing at a good enough level. And I do like the move of Derrick Henry going to Baltimore. But I tend to avoid the older receivers, really Devontae Adams and Mike Evans. Evans was fantastic last year, but you want to get out before, the problems start to rise, and he's 31 now. Devontae Adams, you saw a big, shift in production last year. He was 19 points per game in PPR in 2022, 15 points per game last year. You can blame Jimmy Garoppolo, that's fine, but when receivers start to show you something like that, it's probably not a good time to buy in. So those two guys are round 3 at the earliest for me. You see Devontae Adams for the most part going round 2. If you look at average draft position, which tells you, where some of these players are going, 3 running backs that I'm pretty much out on. Aaron Jones, he's like running back 19 right now, 29 years old, going to Minnesota. James Conner, who was great last year, 1,000-yard season, first time in his career, 29 years old. So I'm just a little bit concerned about his production. And then our guy in Miami, Raheem Mostert, amazing last year. 18 rushing touchdowns, led the position, but he's 32, and what's behind him. Not that he's slow by any stretch, but there's, a Ferrari and a Porsche in the garage that I think are ready to go in Devon Achane and Jalen Wright. So a lot of competition for production there.
I think it's a great point. I don't want to get all the draft strategy out of you today because, we'll get some more next week and get people ready to go who maybe aren't listening today. But I do want to ask you here, assuming that some kind of resolution happens with Brandon Ayuk between now and when we talk next week, give me the scenarios. If he stays in San Francisco, what does it mean? If he ends up being traded to Pittsburgh, what does it mean?
I think San Francisco is the best spot for his fantasy value just because you know what you're getting. Not a lot of targets, so that's a negative, but clearly a lot of efficiency, and that offense just opens up plays for wide receivers. I mean, we see it in Miami, the Shanahan system, the Mike McDaniel system, the Sean McVay system. They just get guys open, and so you've seen great production from Ayuk. If he leaves, the opening in San Francisco is immense for Deebo Samuel and George Kittle. We've seen either of the trio, factoring Ayuk, whenever somebody's missed, the other 2 guys have stepped up. Now there's a wild card because they had Ricky Pearsall, the rookie wide receiver from Florida, in the first round. How much of a role will he have in his rookie campaign? that remains to be seen. But like I said, if there's an Ayuk trade, you heard me mention it before, Debo goes almost to a round 1 pick, top 15 overall. And George Kittle right now, who's tight end 7 for me, he goes into the top 5, right behind, the Mark Andrews, Trey McBride group, but easy top 5 tight end. In Pittsburgh, Ayuk takes a pretty big hit just because, again, quarterback play in an Arthur Smith system. He's the offense coordinator who is the head coach in Atlanta. Not a huge fan of what they do from a passing perspective. If there's 2 guys, if there's 1 guy, like George Pickens is one of my favorite breakout candidates if he's the solo act in Pittsburgh. But those 2 guys in that system, I think they cannibalize each other a little bit. So Ayuk goes from a potential top 15 wide receiver to just barely inside the top 30, so he drops almost half of or doubles his value. So I'd probably be out on Ayuk personally because I think he'll still get drafted too soon.
Jamey, excellent job. Really great having you aboard again for another season. Tell everybody who's new how they can get a hold of you, how they can hear you on CBS and everything you got going on.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's always good to talk to you again. You can check us out at cbssports.com. You can listen to our podcast, which is Fantasy Football Today. You can find it wherever wherever podcasts are available, and we're on YouTube. Usually recording 5 days a week, and then we're also doing some stuff on the CBS Sports Network as well. So you can check us out on TV. That's usually 3 days a week. I think we'll be on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Friday, 1 o'clock Eastern once the season starts, and it's kind of just all up in the air in the preseason. Whenever there's something fun going on, they throw us on TV.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jamey. We'll talk next week, man. I'm looking forward to another great season.
Absolutely, bud. Good to talk to you.